The history of the site dates back to about 1067, which is when the original castle was built on this site. It was a Norman castle built by William the Conqueror, part of his plans to basically keep England as a self-contained country. He built a wooden Motte and Bailey castle on this site. It's a typical formation, dig a big ditch, put the earth in the middle, wooden castle on top, wooden fence around the outside. The room that we are currently sitting in dates from the time of the reign of King John. So he would have been using, or this room would have been being used when he was on the throne, sort of going up until 1216 when he did finally pass away. The gatehouse and the curtain wall that goes around the outside, they were part of the last bits of the castle to be constructed. The unfortunate thing is that most of it no longer exists. I mean, the keep fell down sort of the 1700s and has been then slowly taken apart stone by stone and used in the village, as is often the case. But the castle's original function was sort of defence, protection, look out into the Welsh valleys. But being right in the heart of the Forest of Dean, its secondary and for the most part main function unofficially was sort of administration, the centre of commerce and business and industry for the Forest of Dean. Everything that was going on kind of came through this castle. That was the case going into the 1500s, and then at that point the castle's importance starts to diminish and reduce quite significantly. When you get to going into the 1700s, this castle's on the verge of being abandoned altogether. The prison which was installed in the 1600s, converted from a bedroom into a prison. That was done at the start of the 1600s. That was going on through to the middle of the 1800s, and that was pretty much the last part of the castle to be in use. After the 1800s come along, it's left to abandon almost entirely. It's crumbling quite significantly all the way around, and is eventually bought out and renovated into a family home. And then we, the YHA, we acquired it in 1948 after it was being used as a boarding school for evacuees during World War II. I said since 1948 we've been here running as a youth hostel. One of the things this castle is known for in the wider circle of things is its paranormal activity. Some people will say it's one of the most haunted castles in Britain. Some people will say it's not in the least bit haunted. I've always found it's very much down to personal beliefs. The number of stories that we get, the consistency with stories and the reports that we've got from people from all over the world and different types of people that have come to stay that have got no relation or connection to each other whatsoever, it does give some weight to the stories that we get. Some rooms have a lot more stories surrounding them than others. So some stories will revolve around just people hearing noises, the odd bang and thud, as you get with all old buildings, really. Is it a ghost or is it just a piece of pipework that's 200 years old that's just creaking in the night? And then you get some people that have reported seeing things, whether it's moving objects or actual apparitions themselves. Those ones are a lot less frequent. Up in the guard room, which is one of our dormitory rooms, it has been reported on a few occasions that people have seen the praying woman. She's dressed in what looks like what is described as peasant's robes, sort of dirty and tatty, that kind of dress. And she walks from the doorway, she walks over to the middle of the room, she kneels down facing the back window of the bedroom. She kneels down for a few moments in what looks like prayer, and then she stands up and she simply walks straight out of the window. Interesting that it's that particular window, because that's the window that 600-700 years ago prisoners would have been hung out of. It's the window that faces out over the church. So prisoners that are due for execution are taken to that window, the noose around the neck, and they're just pushed out the window in front of the crowds. You get, there's a story associated with this, two stories actually associated with this particular room. One a lot more infamous than the other. I only discovered one of them very recently. One is that people often hear coming from this end of the castle, usually from this room, the sounds of a crying baby. This story is quite well documented, but the story, so it says, is that when you are in this end of the castle, you can hear music sometimes, but more frequently you're likely to hear the sounds of a baby crying. And the evidence that goes along with this particular story, apart from the fact that it happens more than most with so many different people that don't know anything about it, or at least so they say, is that it relates to a medieval tradition slash practice that we know was done in this particular room regarding the chimney stack in this fireplace, which is where, to prevent evil spirits from getting into your house through your fireplace, you would have to put a dead baby up your chimney breast that's been, at least as far as I'm aware, mummified and wrapped in cloth and put in a little recess that's built specifically in the chimney for this purpose. And then the purity of the baby's soul will ward off the evil spirits. Many, many years ago, when there was a workman up the chimney, whether it was cleaning or repairing, actually found the remains of such a practice and brought out this bundle of cloth from this recess, this hole that had been built into the chimney. My personal, I've got a few that I've experienced in the castle. One was in this room, again, actually, as it happens, with that curtain, specifically that curtain. What happens quite a lot of the time in the winter is we work on our own. It's just one person in to just keep the place ticking over, answer emails and stuff. I was doing my final checks one night, 5 o'clock at night, pitch black outside, all the hostel lights off, no one inside the hostel apart from me, all the doors are locked, and I've checked. This is the last room for me to check on my rounds. It hasn't been windy all day long, and as I walk in through the door, the curtain, the big curtain on the left-hand side, sways, but not just like a little bit like it's flapping in a breeze, like as if someone has kicked it on the bottom. The whole bottom of the curtain is just swayed from one side. And then as I've walked towards it, I felt something brush up my arm. But what was weird about that particular sensation is that it happened at the halfway point, as if, you know, me coming in and startled someone who turned around and kicked the curtain and then tried to leave the room. Door was locked and shut, there was no one in, there was no breeze, so it cannot be explained away that way. And I've come in God knows how many hundreds of times into this room under exactly the same circumstances, and it's only ever happened that once. But my favourite one, which hasn't just happened to me, it did happen to a previous member of staff as well, is downstairs in the stables, which is our secondary dining room. And the latch on that door is from the Victorian period. It's this big, massive, heavy, cast iron latch that you need to lift before you can open the door. Again, it can't just move itself. And I was in the kitchen, and all I hear, through the silence of the castle, is the sound of that latch being lifted and dropped 5 times in a row. There's no one upstairs. There's literally no one in the hostel apart from me. No wind, all doors, all windows shut, and yet the latch on that door rattled 5 times. Again, the level of hauntedness of this castle really depends on how psyched up for it you are. Are you coming here looking for ghosts? Are you expecting to see ghosts, or do you know nothing about it and then have a genuine experience? I mean, that's sort of always how I go on it. If you see exactly what you expect to see in exactly the way you expected to see it, you probably just got your brain running away with you. But when someone that knows nothing about it comes up and says, oh, by the way, I had this experience in my room last night, what was that all about? That's when I take an interest, because I'm thinking, well, there's something to that. If you don't know it's haunted, or you don't think it's haunted, and you experience something that you can't explain away, what's the cause?